أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum Talat. We are back. Another Ramadan, another chance to learn the Holy Qur'an. And today we're going to be learning from you a few Qur'an tips, just as we did in the previous episode. If anyone missed it, you can check it out on the video on the screen now. As mentioned, we're just going to continue on. So Talat, if you can just continue by telling us, or just informing us the importance firstly of why we should be reading the Holy Qur'an, why we should be pronouncing it in the right way, in the correct manner.
So Alhamdulillah, as you know, it's the month of Ramadan, and the Holy Qur'an was revealed in the month of Ramadan. And in this month, many Muslims all across the world, they will be trying to complete one whole round of the Holy Qur'an in terms of recitation. And it's a really good time to ponder over the Holy Qur'an, and many people will want to improve their recitation. And just like us, we want to improve our recitation as well. So just like last year, we've come up with 10 more tips in terms of improving the recitation and the pronunciation of certain words within the Holy Qur'an.
Brilliant. So I think we should get straight into it. As you mentioned, we have 10 tips. You'll try to break it down as easy as you can and also give examples from the Holy Qur'an. I think that's always very beneficial for especially those who are on a journey of whatever level they're at to learn the Qur'an and where these rules are found within the Holy Qur'an. So Talat, the first rule that I have on the list here is Idgham. So could you just explain to us what Idgham means? Because we are talking to an English audience and these are Arabic terminologies. So what does it mean and where is it applied in the Holy Qur'an?
So the first rule, as you said, we're looking into is Idgham. And Idgham basically means to merge or to assimilate or join. And there are many words in the Holy Qur'an that will carry the sukoon, and I'm pretty sure from the last episodes we discussed what sukoon is. So in the Qur'an there are many letters that carry the sukoon, and sometimes we pronounce this letter with the sukoon, and sometimes we have to cross the letter and omit this letter. And so this letter with the sukoon, it normally comes in between the letter that has the vowel, and we discussed these vowels in the previous episodes, the fatha, the kasra, the dhamma. And straight after this letter of sukoon, there will be a letter that is carrying the shadda, and we also discussed this in the previous lesson. And the letter that carries the shadda is called the mushaddad letter. So the rule of idgham is essentially assimilating the previous letter with the fatha, the kasra and the dhamma into the mushaddad letter, which is carrying the shadda. So there's two types of idgham. So the first one that we will be discussing is called Idgham Kamil, which means complete assimilation. So complete assimilation is whereby we're joining the previous letter that has the vowel fatha, kasra and dhamma, and we are joining it straight into the mushaddad letter, and the letter in between with the sukoon is silent. So we do not pronounce this letter in between, and this is where it's called complete. We are completely joining the mutaharrik letter into the mushaddad letter. So there's two, as I mentioned, there's two broad categories. There's many more, of course, but the two broad umbrella categories are Idgham Kamil and Idgham Naqis. And the first one is Idgham Kamil. So if we take a look at Lam or Ra Mushaddad, and when these letters appear after a Noon Sakin or a Tanween, no nasal sound will be assimilated into the next letter. So hereby we will be joining the mutaharrik letter into the mushaddad, and the Noon Sakin and Tanween would not produce a nasal sound. So the first example that I've got on my list over here is Min ladunka. So as you can see over here, we have min and then we have ladunka. Now on the lam, it's a mushaddad letter and it has a shadda on it. And the letter before the noon sakin, the mim, has a kasra. So the correct way to pronounce this word over here will be min ladunka. We are completely joining the mim into the lam mushaddad. Another example we have over here is khayrul lakum. Yeah? Khayrul lakum. So if we take the first part, khayrun, the tanween produces the noon sakin. But in this case, the lam is a mushaddad letter. So always remember the mushaddad letter takes precedence. So in this case, the tanween sound, which is the noon sakin, would not be produced, and we will be saying khayrul lakum. So it's completely assimilated, it's completely joined into the lam mushaddad, and no nasal sound has been produced. Now, we also have some other examples of merging that occur without the noon sakin and tanween. So in this case, there will be no noon sakin and no tanween, and it's still called Idgham Kamil. So the first example is from the Holy Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. So over here in this verse, we have the example of قد تبين. So as you can see, the sukoon is on the dal, qad, but the letter that comes after that, the ta, has a shadda on top. So that takes precedence. So we will be joining the qaf into the ta mushaddad. So it will be qad tabayyana. So this is another example of complete assimilation, idgham kamil.
Sakin, I think it's really nice when you give a real example from the Holy Quran. It just makes it easier to pinpoint exactly what that rule is, and I think the viewers will really appreciate your tilawat as well with that. Jazakallah. So Talat, you mentioned there were two types of idgham. So the next one is idgham naqis, incomplete assimilation. So same thing, could you just go through that rule for us, please?
So idgham naqis is basically incomplete assimilation, whereby the sound of the noon sakin will be assimilated, and you will hear the sound of the noon sakin over here. So we broadly touched upon idgham kamil. So if ya or waw appears after noon sakin or tanween, then the assimilation will take place with a 2-second nasal sound. So in the case of a tanween, only one stroke of tanween will be used in the assimilation. So we've got examples from the Holy Qur'an. So the first one, min yawmin. So in this you can see there's min, and then we have the yawmin, and this is ya mushaddad. And when we are joining the mim into the ya mushaddad, the nasal sound will be produced. So the correct pronunciation of this will be min yawmin. So for at least 2 seconds they say that you should conceal the sound of the noon sakin into your nose. So another example that we have over here is of a tanween now. So as we know, the tanween, when it appears, the sound that is produced is noon sakin. So we have on the screen over here, waliyan wala. So the first example was with ya mushaddad, and now we have waw mushaddad. And the letter before has a tanween, and there is a sound of noon sakin. So when we are doing idgham naqis, we have to conceal the sound of noon sakin into our nose for 2 seconds, and that is the nasal sound.
Is that the nasal sound that you're
That's
trying
the
to
nasal sound,
pinpoint?
yeah. So waliyan wala. So that 2 seconds concealing the sound of the noon into your nose, that is the nasal sound.
It's not a very common noise to make in our everyday life. So is there any tips of how you can master that?
So I think I mentioned this in the last series as well. But sometimes when I was young, we used to practice, producing this nasal sound. And some of our teachers would make us hold our nose to feel the vibration, so that we practice it and concealing the sound of the noon sakin into your nose. So that can help, but obviously don't do that in public.
Yeah, no, it does. It does help with it's basically beautifying your pronunciation of the Holy Quran. The importance of why we are learning these rules is so that we can match the level of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and how he taught us, and how Arabic is supposed to be pronounced in the right manner. So Talat, I'll go to the next rule, which is probably my favorite part of the rules that you've enlisted for us, and that is the often mispronounced letters in the Holy Quran, because this is something which is so common. Everyone learns, in different ways. Everyone has their own language around the world. But with Arabic, it's very specific of how you're supposed to learn it, especially the Arabic of the Holy Quran. So I believe you're going to go through a few of the letters that are mispronounced.
So the first letter that I want to discuss is the tha. And this letter is often mispronounced with the seen. And one word that we can use as an example is batha. And often if this word comes, some people may pronounce it wrong and say bassa as the seen. So the correct pronunciation to pronounce this letter tha is that the tip of your tongue should be touching the top two teeth, the upper tooth in your mouth. And when the tongue is touching, you should pronounce the letter and then blow out and say tha. And it's almost like the English, th in thanks, So it's like almost like you're spreading your mouth a little bit, but the tongue is touching the top two teeth, and then you pronounce this letter tha. So almost like you're smiling. And it's very similar to the word thanks. So the correct pronunciation over here would be batha. So the next letter is the letter ha. Now, this ha is a letter of the throat, and they say that this letter should come from the middle part of your throat. So if you look at your throat and you try and divide it into like 3 sections, try and pronounce this ha from the middle of your throat. And it's often mispronounced and confused with the other ha, which is a lighter ha. Yeah? So if over here I have this one word, ahsan, yeah, ahsan, and it's very, very common that someone can, mispronounce this and say ahsan. Now the other ha, which is the circular ha, this ha actually comes from the bottom of your throat, so not the middle. So if you place your fingers on the bottom part of your throat over here and you pronounce ha as a very light, ha, you will feel this vibration in your throat over here. So this is the differentiation between these two letters. So the first one is the ha from the middle part of your throat, and the correct pronunciation is ahsanu. So one example from the Holy Qur'an where you find both of these letters within one verse. So وَنَحْنُ لَهُ عَابِدُونَ. So over here we have وَنَحْنُ, which is the ha from the throat, the middle part of your throat, and then we have lahu, which is a lighter version of this. So these two letters, they are often mispronounced, so it's very, very important that we pronounce these letters in the correct manner. So the next letter is the zaal, the zaal. And we have one word over here, كَذَّبُوا. So the correct pronunciation is كَذَّبُوا. The tip of the tongue slightly comes out of the mouth, just like the tha, but there is more vibration in this pronunciation. So whereas in the tha, when the tongue was touching the tip of the tooth, the mouth was producing this sound, and the vocal cords were not being used as much, so there wasn't as much vibration. But in this case, the zaal, it's a similar method, similar way to pronounce this letter, but the vocal cords are being used and there's more vibration to this. And the tongue is pressed against the edge of the upper front teeth. So same way like the tha, but we are using the vocal cords over here. So كذبوا. And often this is, mispronounced with za, the letter za. So it's not kazza, it's كذبوا. This is the correct pronunciation. And we have one verse from the Holy Qur'an over here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين كذبوا بآياتنا. So as you can see over here, كذبوا the letter has been used over here, and this is the best example. So the next letter is the saad, saad, and this is often mispronounced and confused with the sin. So as you can see on the screen, we have this word as-salihat. So this would be the correct pronunciation, and this letter has the same articulation point as the letter sin, which is why there could be some sort of confusion when you're pronouncing this letter. But the top of the tongue is raised to the roof of the mouth to make it a heavy and thick sounding letter. So in this case, if we take the sin is a very light letter, Sin, sa, sa. It's a very light letter. But in this case, with the saad, it has to be a bit of a thick letter, circulated, and your tongue should be raised to the roof of the mouth and try to make this sound a little bit heavy. So, saw, As-salihat, as-salihat. So this is the correct pronunciation. So we have one verse from the Holy Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات. So this is the correct pronunciation for this letter. So the next letter is zaad, and this letter is a thick letter, and this is one of the hardest letters to pronounce in the Arabic language, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, but practice makes perfect. This letter is a heavy, thick sounding consonant. So the correct way to pronounce this letter is that the entire side of the tongue touches the base of the molar teeth, either the right side or the left side or both sides. And one thing that you should be very careful is not to confuse this with the dal. This is a thicker letter, the thicker sounding letter, and not to confuse it with the va. So this is very, very important. And one example, beautiful example from the Holy Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والضحى. So that's another beautiful example from the Holy Qur'an. So remember not to confuse this with the dha and not to confuse this with the dal. So Humayon, the next letter is the letter ta, and this is often confused and mispronounced with the letter ta, the simple ta. The biggest difference between these two letters is that the ta is a thicker letter in comparison to the letter ta. And it's very, very important not to get these two letters confused and, not to mispronounce them. So the best way to pronounce this is that your tongue should be touching the bottom part of your top teeth, and you just blow out and you pronounce it and you just say ta. So it's as simple as that. It's just thicker than the ta. And one example from the Holy Qur'an is from Surah Tarqeeq, and the verse is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق. So as you can see with this example in the Holy Qur'an, a perfect example to showcase the correct pronunciation of the letter ta. So Humayon, the next letter, the letter dha, it's not like the letter dhal. You know, before when we mentioned the dhal, and it's not like the letter za. So it's very, very important to pronounce this. And the correct way to pronounce this is that your tongue, you circulate your mouth a little bit and you raise your tongue. Is the sound is the way the sound comes out is the same way, but in this case, the tongue should be touching the top part of your back to the back of your mouth. So we have an example over here on screen. Al-Zahiru. Yeah? So as you can see, it's very different to the letter Dhal and the letter za. And we have one example from the Holy Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فأولئك هم الظالمون. So over here, this is a very, very good example of how this letter has been pronounced. Humayon, the next letter is the letter Ain, you know, one of the most predominant letters, very, very clear, very, very easy to understand and pronounce as well. One thing to bear in mind when we're pronouncing this Ain, it's one of the throat letters and it should come from the middle part of your throat. Not to confuse this letter with the Hamza and the Alif. If we look at this example over here, Asmi'. So as you can see, the Ain, I've produced this sound from the throat, but I didn't say Asmi', because if I do that, then that automatically turns into an Hamza. And if we look at one example from the Holy Qur'an, chapter 20, verse 47, in the end we have over here, Asma'u wa ara. So we have the Alif over here as well, and we have the Ain over here as well. So we can see the differentiation between these two letters. So Humayon, the next letter is the letter Qaf. And this is a thick letter. And this letter is a letter that can often be mispronounced and confused with the other kaf. And we know that there's a lighter kaf, and that kaf is just a simple kaf. And we have two examples over here, shaqqa and then shakka. So as you can see, one is light, one is thick, and one word over here is inshaqqa. So the letter qaf is actually pronounced from the farthest part of your mouth. So right at the back of your mouth, just before the throat. So this letter, the sound of this letter comes from that area within your mouth. So it's like really, really deep into your mouth. The sound actually comes just before your throat. And it's a thick letter. And the other kaf, you know, the kaf that we discussed, which is a lighter kaf, it's almost like a K in English. But this particular qaf is very thick. So we have to be very, very careful in when we pronounce this letter. So I have one verse from the Holy Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. So as you can see over here, we have multiple examples of the letter Qaf, and one thing to remember is that it's a thick letter. So Humayon, the next example, we touched upon Ain earlier on. So the next letter is the Hamza and the Alif. And this letter is also a letter of the throat, but it comes from the different part of the throat. So this, normally they say it comes from the bottom part of your throat. So when you do pronounce this letter, and if you place your fingers at the bottom part, you will feel some sort of vibration. So it comes from the bottom part of the throat. And we have one example over here, yu'marun. Yeah, yu'marun. So sometimes what people tend to do is they tend to, mispronounce this, and they will pronounce the letter Ain and they will say yu'marun, which is wrong. It will change the whole meaning of the word. So over here it will be yu'marun. And I have one example from chapter 16, verse 51, where both the Ain and the Hamza are used. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. So as you can see, the يَفْعَلُونَ has the ayn and the يُؤْمَرُونَ has the hamza. So there's a clear differentiation between these two letters.
Jazakallah Talat. I think you cleared up really well. I think for anyone who does mix up these sounds, I think it's really important to identify each individual letter as it is, and then go and try and practice when you are reciting the Holy Quran. And that's a good practice to do when you are in the mode of training and learning about the pronunciation of the letters. So Jazakallah.
Jazakallah.
So Talat, within the Holy Quran and the letters of the Holy Quran, they are generally split between thick sounding letters and thin sounding letters, or light sounding letters. So in relation to that, one of the terminologies which is often heard is the Tafkheem. So could you explain what this rule is, please?
So we touched upon similar sounding letters earlier. Now we will touch upon the thick sounding letters, and that's exactly what you just mentioned. Tafkheem basically just means thick sounding letters, and it just means thickening, deep, bold. These are all synonyms of Tafkheem. And there are 7 letters that should be articulated with a broad and thick sound. And they are as follows. So we have the first one, which is the kha. The kha is a thick sounding letter, and it's a letter of the throat. So it's coming from the throat. And we have one example over here. Khalidan. The second letter is saad. So saad is a thick letter, and we have one example over here, la sadiqun. So as you can see, the saad over here is thick. So the third thick letter is the daad. We touched upon it earlier, and this is also a letter of tafkheem, and it's thick. And I think the best example to use over here is from Surah Fatiha. And at the end we have وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. So this is a thick letter. The fourth letter is the letter ghain, and this is also a thick letter, gha. It produces the gha kind of sound, and it comes from the throat as well. So this is also a throat letter, and one example over here will be ghafirin, ghafirin. And the next letter is the letter ta. We touched upon it earlier as well when we were discussing the mispronounced letters. This is also a thick letter, a letter of tafkheem, and this will also be pronounced thick and not thin. So we have one example over here, taba, taba, and the next letter is the letter qaf, and we touched upon it earlier as well, and this is also a thick letter, and one example we have over here is qala, qala. And the last letter of tafkheem is the letter va. And the example that we have over here is taladha, taladha. So these 7 letters in the Arabic alphabet are letters of tafkheem, where we pronounce these letters with a thick sound, and we make sure that we produce a thicker sound when we're pronouncing these letters.
Jazakallah. So just as we mentioned, there are thick letters known as tafkheem. There are also the lighter letters known as Tarqeeq. So could you explain and give some examples from that rule as well?
So we've touched upon tafkheem, and Tarqeeq, just like you said, are the light letters. So a very, very simple way to identify these letters, just before I do identify these letters, Tarqeeq just means thinness and lightness. And of the 29 Arabic letters, the 7 letters of tafkheem were the kha, the saad, the daad, the ghain, the ta, the qaf, and the dha. So they're considered tafkheem. And if we exclude these letters, and we exclude the letters Alif, Lam, and Ra, the remaining 19 letters are considered to be letters of Tarqeeq. And these letters from the alphabet will be pronounced light. we find many examples of Tarqeeq, these letters that are light in the Holy Qur'an. So one example, actually two examples I would like to give you is from here, from this verse. So we have over here, fi dinillahi afwaja. So, the lightness that I've used over here, waja, afwaja, afwaja. So this is Tarqeeq. And similarly, in the next verse, we have innahu kana tawwaba. So tawwaba. Over here as well, it's very, very light. The waw is very light, and the ba over here is very light. So tawwaba. It's almost like you're smiling. Ba. So that's Tarqeeq.
So Talat, when it comes to the letter Lam, there are a specific rule, especially with Lamul Jalalah. So could you explain what Lamul Jalalah is and how we can identify the rule for this?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. We've discussed, thick letters, we've discussed thin letters, but there are certain letters where there are specific rules, and you've mentioned it, the Lam Mushaddad. There is a specific rule in regards to this rule and when we have to thicken it. And the only time that you actually do thicken this letter is when this Lam Mushaddad appears in the word of Allah. Yeah? So in certain conditions, this will be pronounced with a thick and heavy sound, and that's only if the letter before this Lam Mushaddad carries a fatha and a dhamma. So if the mutaharrik letter before the Lam Mushaddad has a fatha and a dhamma, then the Lam would be pronounced thick. And this is only in regards to Allah's name. Yeah. So if the previous mutaharrik letter bears a kasra, then it will be pronounced with a thin and empty sound. So we have many, many examples. So before Allah's name, the alif has a fatha, so this will automatically be a thick pronunciation. Allahu, yeah? And then we have a thin example. The ba has a kasra before Allah's name. So over here will be billahi. So in the verse, bismillahi, bismillahi. So it's very, very light. And the reason is because the mutaharrik letter has a kasra. And the next example, qala Allahu. So over here, qala, the lam has a fatha. So automatically the lam mushaddad in Allah's name will be thick. So qala Allahu. So another example, qulillah. Yeah, over here there's a kasra. So the next one, kitabullahi. So this is dhamma, yeah? There's a dhamma on the ba. So automatically the lam in Allah's name will be thick. So kitabullahi. A thick sound will be produced over here. And the next one, falillahi. Falillah. Falillahi. Very, very light because there is a kasra underneath the letter before lamul jalalah.
So Talat, we are powering through a lot of these rules. Of course, each and every rule, requires a lot of practice. And, we are kind of skimming through it just so we can do justice to each and every rule that is found within what we're going to do today. And also bear in mind the time as well. But there is another rule which is quite important, which goes along again with what we've been learning. And that is the Qalqalah rule. So again, could you just explain what this terminology means and how to identify the letters of this rule, Qalqalah?
So this Qalqalah is basically a bouncing sound that's produced. And there's 5 letters in question. The letters are Qaf, Ta, Ba, Jim, and Dal. Yeah? So whenever these 5 letters appear, it's not just any 5 letters. Another common practice, that people do is they will unnecessarily produce the sound of Qalqalah on every single one of these letters. But one thing to remember over here is whenever these 5 letters appear with the sukoon on top of them, that is when you do the rule Qalqalah over here. So we have an example over here. You know, the best example, the first word that was revealed to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that was Iqra. So that the slight bounce, you know, the slight bounce that was produced in Iqra, yeah, that bounce is called Qalqalah, and it's like a jerking sound, yeah. So the next one, Fawasatna, yeah, over here the ta is a letter of Qalqalah and is bearing the sukoon. And the next example, Ibrahim. The next one, Ajruhu. The next one, Yajidka. So that slight bounce on the letter, that's Qalqalah. And that only appears when this sound is only produced when the sukoon comes on the Qalqalah, on the letter of the Qalqalah.
What I noticed when you were reciting, it's almost as if there's a sort of silent fatha on each letter, but not really. It's not a hard stop.
No,
it's not a full.
Yeah, it's like a
either.
bouncing. It's like It's like a bouncing. You're bouncing on the letter.
It's really important to make that sound to connect onto the next letter.
So Humayon, one other thing to remember is that some people might, give unnecessary Qalqalah on letters that do not fall under this category. So for example, like takfurun, in the Holy Qur'an, some people might, even though this is a different kaf, it's not the thick qaf in question. They might just pronounce this as takfurun, they might do that, and that is incorrect. And it's very, very important not to do unnecessary Qalqalah, and Qalqalah should only be done on these 5 letters: qaf, ta, ba, jim, and dal.
I think it's quite common as well when our teachers were teaching us that, the word kutuba jaddin, if you just take each letter of those words, you'll be able to remember the 5 letters. So instead of trying to memorize them individually, just make it into one acronym.
One word, acronym.
And then you'll be able to identify which ones are the Qalqalah and which ones aren't. So then you won't have to apply it onto the wrong letter. The next rule is Izhaar. So again, could you tell us what this is, please?
So Izhaar just means manifestation, in simple terms. And this rule in particular, in question, it revolves around the noon sakin. We've touched upon many rules in regarding, the noon sakin. In this case, when the noon sakin appears in a word or in the Quran, and the letter that comes after it is a letter of Izhaar, then there are certain rules that need to be applied in terms of pronouncing it. So there are 6 letters that are in question. So the Alif and the Hamza, the Ha, the Ain and the Ha, the Ghain and Kha. Whenever these letters come after the noon sakin, they come straight after the noon sakin, then we would not conceal the sound of noon into our nose. We will not apply any special rule on it. We will manifest that sound. We will clearly express that sound of the noon sakin. So one example that I would like to give you is yan'awna. So over here, I'm not doing any nasal sound because the letter that has come after the noon sakin is a hamza. And because of this hamza, it's a letter of Izhaar, I have to manifest the sound of noon. I have to fully pronounce it. I don't need to conceal the sound. I don't need to do an Ikhfa, which we will touch on later on. So in this case, it will be very, very clear. It's a clear sound. Yan'awna. And then we have one more example. Man amana. Man amana. With the example of the ha, we have yanha. Yanha. in hadha, in hadha. With the example of the ayn, we have an'amta, an'amta. Another one, min alaqin, min alaqin. So with the ha, we have wanhar, man harrama. So with the letter ghain, we have rabbun ghafoor. Yeah, no ikhfa done over here, no concealing of the sound. It's a clear manifestation of the sound. Another example, min ghillin. And now with the kha, we have min khawfin. So these are the letters of Izhaar. And whenever these letters come after the noon sakin, you have to say the noon sakin clearly, and you do not pronounce the letter in an ikhfa sort of way.
Very good. Jazakallah. So Talat, we're coming towards the end of the video. Alhamdulillah. We are on the 9th rule now. You mentioned Ikhfa before along with Izhaar. So I think now we can go a bit deeper into this rule and just explain to us a few of the examples from Ikhfa.
Ikhfa means concealment, hiding the sound, concealing the sound within. Yeah, that's what Ikhfa means. And we will be touching upon 2 letters concerning the Ikhfa. The first one is the mim sakin. Yeah, whenever the mim sakin comes, there are certain rules in place in regards to the mim sakin, in which we will have to conceal the sound of the mim sakin and produce a nasal sound. And there are certain rules in regards to that. So whenever the letter ba appears after a mim sakin, any letter, any mim sakin in the Holy Qur'an, if there is a ba that comes after it, there will be a small nasal sound that will be produced in regards to this rule. So we have one example over here. تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ. So over here, the mim sakin has come, and straight after the mim sakin, there is a ba. So I will produce a nasal sound for 2 seconds and conceal the sound. And then we have another example over here. رَبُّهُمْ بِهِمْ, رَبُّهُمْ بِهِمْ. And one more example. هُمْ بِآيَاتِنَا. So this is Ikhfa mim sakin. So Humayon, just to summarize Ikhfa mim sakin, there's a small nasal sound that is produced when the mim sakina comes, and when the mim sakin comes, there will be a ba straight after this. So it's only the only time that you would actually conceal the sound and produce a nasal sound with the mim sakin is when there's a ba straight after it.
Talat, you mentioned about Ikhfa mim sakin. So there's also Ikhfa noon sakin. So I'm guessing it's kind of similar. So could you just explain and give some examples of that rule too?
So before we mentioned the letters of Izhaar, and whenever these letters come after the noon sakin, we have to manifest the sound of the noon. Now, Ikhfa noon sakin is not a clear manifestation of the noon sakin, but it's actually concealing the sound of noon sakin and producing a nasal sound. So there are certain letters, other than the letters of that have been mentioned. If Ikhfa noon sakin does appear in the Holy Qur'an, you will be able to identify these letters when you minus out the letters of Izhaar and the other letters in question that were discussed in previous discussions. So when the noon sakin appears and we have an Ikhfa letter, that is all the other letters that are left now in the alphabet, then the nasal sound is produced. So Humayon, we have one example over here, and it's a very good example. ينقضون. So over here I produced a nasal sound because of the noon sakin over here. And this is different from the Izhaar. And just to, give it more flavor, we'll just use the verses from the Holy Qur'an. كلا إنها تذكرة فمن شاء ذكره. So as you can see over here, فمن, I have concealed the sound of noon and produced the Ikhfa noon sakin.
Approximately how long should we be extending that sound for?
So they say that you should do it for 2 seconds and 2 counts, but as discussed in the previous discussions from last year, the prolongation of these letters depends on the mode of your tilawat. So sometimes if you are, if you look at the Taraweeh prayers or in Salah, sometimes it's like it's a bit of a fast-paced mode of tilawat. So, but sometimes you'll be reciting the Quran in a very slow manner. So the prolongations you should adjust according to the mode of the tilawat.
So Jazakallah Talat, I think that brings us to the end of this episode. Because it is Ramadan and a lot of people are delving into the Quran and learning a lot and reciting a lot. Do you have any tips, as you have been giving already, but what tips do you have in general regarding the Holy Quran?
I think because it's the month of Ramadan, it's the most blessed month, and this is where everyone sits down and we should be reading the Quran every single day, but an extra focus is given into the recitation of the Holy Quran, and we hear the recitation and we hear such beautiful recitations of the Holy Quran, and it's just very, very amazing to just sit down and recite the Holy Quran. One tip that I would like to give everyone is to listen to a lot of recitations of the Holy Qur'an. The more you listen to different types of recitations, the more you delve into how to produce these sounds. There's so many videos, so many recordings of beautiful, beautiful recitations of the Holy Qur'an, where you can sit down and you can follow through the Qur'an. Whilst you're listening to the recitation, you can follow through and identify these different letters and different pronunciations. There's so much available online. So my only tip for this Ramadan would be to listen to as many recitations as you can, and that will help you improve your own recitation, inshallah.
Very well said. I think my takeaway especially after today and listening to all these rules, is that no matter how experienced you are, no matter how many times you've completed the Holy Quran, there's always something to learn, there's always something to improve on.
Of course.
So never think that you've reached your pinnacle. You should always keep striving and keep learning. And the Quran is something which will keep on giving knowledge, keep on giving treasures. The more you learn, the more you'll seek, and the more you can teach others as well. So Jazakallah Talat, I think it was a very beautiful episode, and inshallah our viewers also benefit from all the rules that we spoke about today, inshallah.
Inshallah.